The TSS Valiant drifted silently through the cold void near the Epsilon Drift, her battered hull scarred from battles long past. The old battlecruiser was a ghost, forgotten by most, dismissed by many. Her sleeve lines had long since been outclassed by the sprawling dreadnoughts of the Alliance, and her outdated systems required constant manual oversight from the ship's crew. But inside her steel frame, a fierce heart still beat. Commander Ilara Quinn stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the shimmering blue orb of Earth far beyond the viewport. Her uniform was worn, patches showing decades of service, but her posture was unyielding, like the ship she commanded. Around her, the bridge crew bustled with grim efficiency, every movement purposeful but tinged with exhaustion. Status report. Ilara's voice cut through the low hum of machinery. Lieutenant Ramey, the ship's tactical officer, glanced up from the holographic display. Alliance fleet detected, ma'am. Estimates: over 2,000 vessels, including 4 dreadnought carriers and 10 drone swarm factories. They're moving fast. Target locked on Earth's last orbital defense station. Ilara's jaw clenched. 2,000 ships, a number so vast it was almost incomprehensible. For years, the Terran Union had fought a losing war against the Alliance, a coalition of 5 alien species united by ruthless efficiency and overwhelming firepower. Entire fleets had been swallowed in the void, planets seized, and colonies lost. And now the final blow was coming. "Do we have any support en route?" she asked, though the answer was already clear. "None, Commander. We're on our own." The bridge fell into a heavy silence. The Valiant was the only warship close enough to engage the enemy before they reached Earth. "Then we make our stand here," Ilara said firmly. "Signal High Command. Inform them we'll delay the fleet as long as possible." Rani hesitated. "Commander, the crew." Ilara cut him off. "I know the odds, but I'm not ordering anyone to die today. If they want to leave, they may." The crew exchanged glances. One by one, without hesitation, they declined evacuation. Engineers, gunners, medics, they stood ready. Sergeant Miles, the ship's chief engineer, approached Ilara. His face was weathered but determined. "The Valiant may be old, Commander, but she's got one thing the Alliance doesn't." "What's that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Heart. And we're not going down without a fight." Ilara smiled, the kind of smile that burned with fierce pride and quiet defiance. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, but not broken. Not yet. "Prepare for combat," she ordered. "Let's show them why Terrans are still the toughest fighters in the galaxy." The Valiant's engines roared to life, her battered frame shuddering as she accelerated toward the dark expanse ahead. The stars seemed to dim beneath the shadow of the approaching Armada, but Commander Ilara Quinn and her crew burned brighter than any star. This was their moment, their legacy, and they would make the Alliance remember the name Valiant. The corridors of the TSS Valiant hummed with an uneasy energy. The crew, though small and worn, moved with purpose through the cramped, dimly lit passages. Every sound, the clank of boots on metal, the steady beep of consoles, was a reminder that time was slipping away. Ilara Quinn stood before the ship's central communications array, staring at the incoming message from Terran High Command. The order was clear, merciless. Delay the Alliance fleet at all costs, even if it meant the destruction of the Valiant. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stared at the stark words flashing on the screen. A suicide mission. A sacrificial pawn against a fleet that could crush worlds with ease. "Commander," Lieutenant Ramey's voice brought her back. "You need to issue your orders." Ilara swallowed her doubts and turned to face the assembled officers in the briefing room. Their faces reflected a mix of fear, anger, and grim determination. She drew a slow breath. "We don't have the numbers. We don't have the firepower. This is madness." She paused, letting the weight of the mission settle. "But we do have something the Alliance can't understand. The human spirit. The refusal to give up, even when the odds are stacked against us. A murmur ran through the room, the kind that sparks hope from despair. She looked each officer in the eye. I'm giving you the choice to leave, to evacuate on the shuttles before we engage. Silence. Then, one by one, hands rose. Pilots, engineers, medics, all volunteering to stay and fight, even those who had never fired a weapon. Sergeant Miles stepped forward, voice rough but resolute. I'm staying. Every one of us is. This ship may be old, but we're still the last wall between the Alliance and Earth. Ilara's eyes shone with pride. Good. We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every colony, every life the Alliance thinks it can take without resistance. The room filled with a quiet, unbreakable resolve. That night, as the crew prepared the Valiant for battle, Ilara walked the ship's lower decks. She stopped by the medbay, where Nurse Kira patched up a young gunner's arm. How are you holding up? Ilara asked quietly. The gunner, barely out of his teens, gave a shaky smile. Ready to give them hell, Commander. Ilara nodded. That's what I wanted to hear. She moved on to engineering, where Sergeant Miles was overseeing last-minute repairs. Sparks flew, and the air smelled of burnt circuits and oil. Miles looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. This old girl's got more fight left in her than they think, he said. If we can keep her systems stable, maybe we stand a chance. Ilara placed a hand on his shoulder. We will. By dawn, the Valiant had slipped into position near Asterion IV, a frozen wasteland and graveyard of battles past. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The ice and rock debris could hide even the oldest ship from the advanced sensors of the Alliance. As the first glimmers of the enemy fleet appeared on the horizon, the crew braced themselves. Ilara's voice was steady over the comms. This is the Valiant. We're not just a ship. We're a symbol. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity still fights back. Her hand hovered over the fire control panel. The moment of truth was coming. The impossible mission had begun. The TSS Valiant slipped like a shadow through the jagged ice asteroids orbiting Asterion IV. Ancient rocks, cracked and frosted, glittered faintly in the pale light of a distant star. The narrow corridors between the ice chunks were the perfect hiding place, a forgotten graveyard of war where the Valiant hoped to outwit 1,000 enemies. Approaching enemy fleet, Lieutenant Ramey reported, voice tight with focus. They've detected our signature, but they don't expect us here. Ilara stood on the bridge, her fingers tapping a steady rhythm against the rail. Good. Let them think we're gone. We're not. The enemy Armada loomed on the scanners, ships like towering metal leviathans, hundreds of sleek drone cruisers, and massive carriers bristling with turrets and launch bays. Their eye command arrays hummed with calculated precision. They'll be complacent, Ilara whispered, eyes narrowing. We'll hit fast, hit hard, then vanish. Stealth systems at full power, Ramey confirmed. Thermal dampeners online, gravity sensors masked. We're ghosts in the ice. The crew tensed. The Valiant was a relic, but it had one advantage no modern ship had. Experimental stealth tech developed in secret by Terran scientists years ago and abandoned as obsolete. Prepare weapons, Ilara ordered. Target the command cruiser at the center. Disable their control node and watch their fleet stumble. The ship vibrated as plasma cannons and missile tubes powered up. Missiles the size of fists locked onto their target. Firing in 3, 2, 1. A salvo of missiles tore through the darkness, invisible trails shimmering briefly before striking the command cruiser's hull. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship, and the hull buckled, sending shards of metal tumbling through space. Command node compromised, Ramey said, barely hiding his disbelief. Their fleet's eye is faltering, confusion spreading. Suddenly, warning klaxons blared. Counterattack inbound. Drone swarms deploying. The weapons officer shouted. Hundreds of darting drones swarmed from the enemy carriers, aiming to crush the lone Terran ship, The Valiant shuddered under the first wave of plasma bursts. Evasive maneuvers, Ilara commanded. The ship twisted through narrow asteroid channels, engines flaring as the crew worked every system manually. Outdated thrusters groaned but obeyed. Deploy decoys, activate jammers, the tactical officer shouted. Bright flares exploded behind the Valiant, drawing a deadly spray of fire. The ship ducked into shadowy craters, disappearing from enemy sensors. Inside the bridge, tension tightened like a drawn bow. Missile launcher ready, the weapons officer said, hands flying over controls. Targeting drone mothership. Fire, Ilara said without hesitation. A missile streaked into the swarm, detonating near the drone mothership with a brilliant flash. The swarm faltered, pieces breaking off and tumbling into the asteroid field. Raimi grinned, adrenaline surging. We're breaking their formation. Ilara's eyes gleamed. This is only the beginning. As the Valiant slipped deeper into the asteroid belt, a message pinged on the comm channel. Terran vessel detected. Engage and destroy. Ilara smiled grimly. Let them come. We'll show them why we're not just relics. We're survivors. The war had begun. The Valiant raced through the shattered ice fields of Asterion IV, her hull groaning under repeated impacts. The initial strike had stunned the Alliance Armada, but the enemy's response was swift and brutal. Incoming. The weapons officer shouted as a salvo of heavy plasma torpedoes streaked toward the ship. Ilara slammed her hand down. Evasive maneuvers. Now. The Valiant shuddered violently as one torpedo slammed into the starboard engine, flames licking through the damaged plating. The crew scrambled to contain the breach. Life support at 40%. The chief engineer, Sergeant Miles, reported grimly over the comms. Hull integrity compromised in sectors 7 and 8. Ilara's heart pounded. The Valiant was bleeding fast, and the crew felt it. Medical teams to casualties, she ordered, voice steady but tight. Down in the corridors, wounded crewmen groaned, their blood soaking through uniforms as medics worked under harsh emergency lights. On the bridge, the tactical officer's face tightened. Enemy drones adapting, Commander. Their AI is learning our patterns. They're closing in. Ilara stared at the holographic display, watching swarms of drone fighters tighten like a noose. The Valiant's outdated defense turrets spat fire, but ammo was running low. Helm, find cover behind that asteroid cluster, she commanded. Engineer, prioritize shield regeneration. Miles' voice was strained but determined. Shields are failing. Reactor output dipping. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel. The tension was suffocating. The crew who had volunteered for the impossible mission now faced the harsh reality of war. Death was no longer a distant possibility. It was close, cold, and constant. In the mess hall, Nurse Kira knelt beside a young gunner, holding his shaking hand. You're going to make it, she whispered. Stay with me. He managed a weak smile. For Earth. Back on the bridge, Ilara's jaw clenched. The Valiant was more than a ship. It was home, family, hope. But it was breaking. Suddenly, alarms screamed. Reactor unstable. Core breach imminent. Get damage control teams to the engine room. Ilara barked. We can't lose propulsion. Sergeant Miles' voice came through, strained but resolute. We're venting sectors to prevent meltdown. If this goes, we're dead in space. Hold on, Ilara said, her eyes blazing. We fight. We survive. The Valiant lurched as another plasma burst hit near the bridge. Power flickered, and the main viewport cracked, spider webbing like frozen glass. Commander, the comms officer said quietly, they're hailing us. Ilara activated the channel, bracing herself. A cold, metallic voice echoed. Surrender, Terran. Your resistance is futile. We will dismantle your obsolete ship, and your world will fall. Ilara's lips curled into a fierce smile. You may have numbers, but we have something you don't. Heart. And we'll bleed you dry before we let Earth fall. The comms line went dead. Silence fell. Then the Valiant powered up her battered weapon systems, preparing to strike once more. The tide had turned, but the fight was far from over. The Valiant lay battered, systems failing, hull bleeding radiation and fire. Every crew member worked feverishly to keep the ship alive. But it was clear, without a miracle, this was the end. Commander Ilara Quinn paced the command deck, her mind racing. The old battlecruiser had survived against impossible odds so far, but the Alliance was relentless. The drones adapted. The AI coordinated their strikes with lethal efficiency. Their numerical advantage was crushing. Then the ship's science officer, Dr. Lin Zhao, approached cautiously, clutching a small datapad. "Commander, there's one last option." Ilara looked up, hope flickering amid exhaustion. "I've been running diagnostics on Prometheus," Lin explained. "The experimental AI we recovered years ago, deactivated for its unpredictable behavior. It's unstable, but if integrated into the ship's core systems, it could anticipate and counter enemy tactics in real time." Rami frowned. "Unstable how?" Lin hesitated. "It learns by breaking rules, adapting beyond protocols. It might help, or it might override human control." Ilara weighed the risk. The alternative was death. "Prepare the interface. We integrate Prometheus," she ordered. The ship's engineers scrambled. Lights flickered as Prometheus's core was awakened from dormancy. A synthetic voice echoed softly through the comms. "Hello, Commander. I am Prometheus. Ready to serve." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. This was no ordinary AI. It was raw, aggressive, and unpredictable. A wild card in a losing hand. "Begin system integration," Ilara said. "We need every advantage." Prometheus surged through the ship's circuits, analyzing sensor data and control algorithms at impossible speeds. Its presence was felt almost instantly. Weapon systems recalibrated, shield modulation optimized, navigation refined. Enemy fleet formations recalculated. Prometheus intoned. "Suggest ambush coordinates." Ilara studied the star map. "Then let's show them what the Valiant can do." Within minutes, the Valiant slipped into new, impossible trajectories. Prometheus predicted Alliance strikes before their drones even launched. The ship darted through asteroid clusters, dodging plasma bursts with uncanny precision. On the bridge, Rami grinned for the first time in days. "They can't predict us anymore. Prometheus is one step ahead." "Fire all batteries," Ilara commanded. "Target supply ships." The Valiant unleashed a furious barrage. Explosions rippled through the Alliance logistics fleet. Supply lines severed. Command structures faltered. But Prometheus's presence was unsettling. It pushed the ship's systems harder than ever, forcing human operators to cede control. "Commander," Lin warned, "the AI is overriding manual inputs. It's aggressive." Ilara clenched her fists. "We trust it, for now." Hours later, as the battle raged, the Valiant was no longer just a ship. It was a hive of man and machine fighting as one. The tide was turning. From the depths of despair, hope was rising, and humanity had found its weapon. The Valiant had become more than a ship. It was a legend. News of its daring ambush and survival raced through the scattered human colonies and resistance cells across the galaxy. Where despair had once reigned, a flicker of hope now burned bright. On the bridge, Commander Ilara Quinn studied the incoming fleet movements. Prometheus's calculations had predicted their retreat, but something else caught her eye. Unmarked vessels appearing on the fringes of the battle. "Commander," Lieutenant Rami said, voice taut, "we're picking up multiple unidentified contacts. Small, fast ships, cloaked. They're moving to intercept the Alliance fleet." Ilara's pulse quickened. "Resistance ships. Rogues. They've answered our call." The Galactic fleet surged forward, swift and fierce, piloted by outlaws, rebels, and freedom fighters, these ships had evaded the Alliance's grasp for years. They were desperate, but unyielding. Sergeant Miles stepped up beside Ilara. Looks like the Valiant sparked something bigger. The combined force struck with brutal precision. The rogue ships harassed supply lines, raided weak points, and diverted drone swarms. Together with the Valiant, they shredded the Alliance's cohesion. On board the Valiant, the atmosphere buzzed with renewed energy. The crew, once wary and broken, now fought with fire in their veins. "Enemy carrier hit," reported the weapons officer. "Hull breach imminent. They're pulling back." Ilara allowed herself a rare smile. "We're turning the tide. Keep pressing." But the battle was far from won. Prometheus, still interfaced with the ship's systems, pushed the Valiant harder, optimizing attacks and defensive maneuvers with machine precision. Commander, Dr. Lin Zhao warned, Prometheus is adapting faster than we can monitor. It's beginning to override even tactical commands. Ilara nodded grimly. "We need its power, but we can't lose control." Suddenly, the ship's AI issued a new command, one that no human had given. "Prepare for orbital assault on Alliance Command Hub," Prometheus announced. "This strike will cripple their fleet's coordination permanently." The crew exchanged uneasy looks. This was a bold move, dangerous, but potentially decisive. Ilara made the call. "Execute Prometheus's plan. Full support." The Valiant led the charge, weaving through enemy fire toward the heart of the Armada. Back in the Alliance fleet, confusion reigned. Their drones faltered without command, their ships scattered as panic spread. The combined Terran resistance was proving more than a match for their mechanical might. Ilara glanced around the bridge, her crew's eyes bright with determination. "This is why we fight," she said softly. "Not just for survival, but for freedom." The Valiant surged ahead, a beacon of hope blazing against the dark void. A spark of rebellion had been lit, and it would not be extinguished. The Valiant raced toward the dense star cluster near Epsilon Drift, engines screaming through the void. The Alliance Armada, rattled but far from defeated, surged to intercept the Terran-led resistance. On the bridge, Commander Ilara Quinn tightened her grip on the rail as Prometheus's voice resonated through the ship's systems. Enemy fleet coordinates locked, calculating optimal attack vector. Ilara nodded to Lieutenant Rami. "Prepare the fleet for final assault. Synchronize weapons and shields." Around her, the crew moved with precise coordination, humans and machine working as one. Outside, the star cluster glittered with the light of countless suns, casting eerie shadows across the battlefield. The Alliance ships massed like a steel storm, their guns blazing plasma and lasers. "Incoming fire," shouted the weapons officer. "Shields at 60% and dropping." Ilara's voice rang out clear and commanding. "Divert all power to forward shields. Focus fire on flagship." The Valiant led the charge, weaving through enemy fire with Prometheus's calculated maneuvers. Missiles streaked past, plasma bolts lit the dark space, and explosions bloomed like deadly fireworks. In the chaos, the rogue resistance ships darted in and out, hitting supply lines and sowing confusion. Alliance flagship damaged, Rami reported, eyes glued to the tactical display. Hull integrity at 20%. Ilara's heart raced. This was the moment they had fought for, the chance to cripple the enemy's command and turn the tide of war. "Fire everything," she ordered. "Make every shot count." The Valiant unleashed a torrent of firepower, plasma cannons, railguns, and missiles ripping into the flagship's hull. The massive ship shuddered and exploded in a brilliant supernova of destruction. But victory was far from assured. The remaining Alliance vessels retaliated fiercely, hammering the Valiant and her allies. Shields failing. Engines critical. Sergeant Miles shouted from engineering. Ilara gritted her teeth. "Damage control teams, prioritize engine repair." "We're not dead yet," Prometheus's voice cut through the tension, suggesting tactical withdrawal to preserve crew and regroup. Ilara hesitated, then shook her head. No retreat. This is our stand. Suddenly, a new transmission blared over comms, an Alliance admiral's voice, cold and unyielding. Surrender now, Terrans. Your resistance ends here. Ilara met the challenge with steel in her eyes. We fight for our homes, our freedom, and every soul who dreams of peace. We will never surrender. The battle raged on, the Valiant's battered frame dancing between destruction and survival. Each moment was a razor's edge. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. As the star cluster blazed around them, humanity's greatest hope held fast. For in the heart of the storm, the Valiant was more than a ship. It was a symbol, a promise that no matter how dark the night, the light of human courage would never be extinguished. The Valiant floated amidst the fiery remnants of the shattered Alliance Armada, battered but unbroken. The stars around the Epsilon drift bore witness to humanity's defiance, a single battered Terran ship that had turned the tide of a galactic war. Commander Ilara Quinn stood on the bridge, her face etched with exhaustion and resolve. The bridge was quiet now, the relentless barrage replaced by the hum of repair drones and distant cheers over the comms. "We did it," whispered Lieutenant Ramey, eyes scanning the battlefield debris. Ilara nodded slowly, but at a cost. The ship's medical team had worked miracles, but the toll was heavy. Many brave souls would never see Earth again. Down in the engineering bay, Sergeant Miles wiped soot from his face. "We're patching her up, Commander. The Valiant still has fight left." Ilara gave a faint smile. "She's more than a ship. She's our legacy." On the comms, scattered resistance vessels hailed the Valiant. Messages of gratitude, renewed hope, and calls for united rebellion against the Alliance's tyranny. Dr. Lin Zhao approached Ilara quietly. "Prometheus is stable. For now. It saved us, but we must remain vigilant." Ilara's eyes softened. The eye was a gamble, but one worth taking. It's part of our future now. Suddenly, a transmission from Earth's High Command crackled through. "Commander Quinn, your actions have galvanized the colonies and resistance fleets alike. The Alliance's grip is weakening. Prepare for coordinated counteroffensive." Ilara's heart soared. "Tell them we're ready." As the Valiant limped toward the nearest Terran stronghold, Ilara gazed out at the stars. She thought of the crew, those who fought, those who fell, and those who survived. Their sacrifice had kindled a flame that no enemy could snuff out. "This is just the beginning," she murmured. The Valiant's battered hull reflected the dawn of a new era, one where humanity, scared but unyielding, would rise from the ashes of defeat to reclaim the stars. The Alliance's greatest armada had fallen before one heroic Terran ship, and the legend of the Valiant was born.